It's a funny story about the book. I actually set out to write a totally different book. The book was originally supposed to be called Under an Hour, because the philosophy was that fastest is bestest now, that being quick and nimble is the greatest competitive advantage that any company can have in pharma or any other industry. But unlike most authors and consultants, I thought, hey, if I'm gonna write a whole book about this, I should make sure that's true. So I conducted this massive research project. We partnered with Edison Research, which is a very large attitude collection company, and we did this whole project on the science of complaint, who complains and where and why and how in America. And what we discovered is that speed actually isn't the most important thing. The most important thing is just showing up. 1/3 of all customer complaints today are never answered. And so those customers are, of course, massively unhappy. They're unhappy about whatever they were unhappy about to begin with, and then their complaint is ignored, which takes a bad situation and makes it worse. So speed is important, but the most important thing is to answer every customer in every channel, every time. Customer service has been around since the time of Pompeii, and as a result, there's lots and lots of books about customer service, but most of them are about the sort of emotional intelligence side of customer service, the empathy side, and that's incredibly important. We talk about that in Hug Your Haters as well, but this is really the first modern book about customer service, because what we talk about in Hug Your Haters is the importance of new channels of customer communication. Customers increasingly are trying to interact with companies, pharma and otherwise, using Twitter, using Facebook, using Instagram, using Snapchat, using YouTube, using messaging bots, using apps, all these things that didn't used to be an issue. Look, for a long time, like for thousands of years, companies had it pretty easy when it comes to interacting with customers, because it was either face-to-face, phone, email, I guess maybe fax for a short period of time, but most of our customer interactions took place in private. Now, increasingly, and the research for the book proves this, more and more customer interactions are taking place in private, and that means that customer service has become a spectator sport. Lots of people can see how you treat customers, good or bad. With social media, and increasingly I think we all as consumers tend to more and more in many cases use social media as a contact mechanism, partially because we perceive it to be a better venue. It certainly happened for me where I've gotten poor service on the phone or via email and have chosen to then communicate to a brand on Twitter or Facebook or otherwise. And I think that happens more and more all the time. But what that creates for businesses, for brands in pharma and any other industry, is a real staffing challenge. Because now you have to figure out, okay, do the people that we have on the phone and the people we have answering emails, do we also train them to answer tweets or interact in Facebook, or do we get a whole different crew and train them differently and give them different managers and different roles and responsibilities? Much of the software that we use for customer service and incident tracking isn't cross-channel compatible, so the same software that you use to, say, manage your telephone call center isn't viable to manage social media interactions, so there's lots of disruption. And fundamentally, what social media has done is disrupted customer service in the exact same ways and for the exact same reasons that social media has disrupted marketing. It's the same cycle, it's just now applied to a different part of the business. Like it is difficult when you're faced with negative criticism and unhappy customers and feedback that you don't want to hear. In fact, we talked to some psychiatrists in the book, and they detail the brain chemistry changes that happen when you confront negativity. It's really interesting. Like your whole brain goes a little haywire for a while, which is why you see a lot of negative and really angry responses from businesses. You see that on Yelp all the time, right? So somebody says, I didn't like my restaurant meal, and the restaurant owner jumps on there like, how dare you? And it gets to be like this crazy, negative back and forth. Happens all the time, and part of it's just an emotional, kind of fight or flight triggered response. But that's not really the best way to handle it. It's important to understand and to recognize that out of every 100 unhappy customers, only 5 will complain in a way that you as a business or brand can find. And that's across the totality of contact mechanisms. That's 5 out of 100 combined: email, Facebook, Twitter, fax, face-to-face, phone, 5 out of 100. So those 5 are doing you an enormous favor, because they are quite literally taking their time voluntarily to tell you what you can do better. And that is a gift. That's why we need to run toward complaints instead of running away from them. Pharma certainly has challenges that other industries don't have as it relates to customer service in public, whether it's social media or otherwise. The good news is that many of the social channels now allow for private conversations to take place on top of or behind public interaction, so that's going to help from some HIPAA perspectives. From a staffing issue, it really is an interesting question, because do you need to have medical professionals handling your Twitter, for example? I think the answer is no. And the reason I say that is because in the research we did for the book, we discovered that pharma as an industry has a little bit more of a lag time. The expectations of customers for speed in pharma is not as acute as it is for a lot of other industries. So said another way, in pharma, you can get away with answering a tweet several hours later or maybe the next day, and you couldn't do that if you were an airline, for example. Consequently, what that allows pharma to do, at least for now, is to have somebody in the front lines who perhaps is not a medical professional, but can find all the tweets and Facebook posts and other things, forum posts, triage those, batch them, and then get somebody who's on the medical side of the team, get answers from them, and then triage it back to the customer. That handoff would be too laborious and take too long in many other industries, but in pharma, customers, at least today, will allow that to occur.